is your relationship with President Boakai?
I think President Boakai and I had a better relationship when I was vice president than we have now.
Why?
Well, the office of the presidency is not just something you can just enter anyhow. You have to come and be invited. I haven't yet had an opportunity until my son died, when his nephew died, and he came to say that he was sorry. But before then, I hadn't been able to meet him. I've asked for an appointment. I hadn't gotten one. They keep switching it back and forth. But I think the relationship between us when I was vice president and when he was vice president, because working in the Senate, I was a member of the Ways and Means Committee.
You were in office then?
I was a member of the Ways and Means Committee, and you had to always consult the vice president. So we had a very good relationship when he was vice president. And when I became vice president, I know I visited him several times to consult him. But right now, it's like there's a family relationship, but there's no personal relationship, I don't think.
Have you heard a lot of people say the relationship between he and your former boss, former President Weah, is not good? Have you heard that? Do you believe that?
I can only speak for me. I know how it is with me, so I'm not sure what his relationship is with President Weah. I don't think the way President Weah treated him as president, because I know he visited him several times, him and his wife. President Weah and the First Lady visited with him several times when we were in power. So did I. I don't know if he's been to visit him or if he's asked him to come and visit him. I don't know. And it would be wrong for me to assume something that I'm not clear of. But I don't think there's also a relationship at that level.
Have you heard people say you did not do much to reconcile the country? You, the government, not Taylor, not Senate, not Vice President Taylor.
And that's an issue. I think the crux of the problem we're having, even if you look at the noise in the media, you realize that the country is not reconciled. The country is divided into two blocks, and people are standing in their position. There are a few people shifting back and forth. I think this divide will get clearer as we go towards 2029. But I think the country is not reconciled, though, and I think any government that is in power, any government that intends to come to power, has to consider that as a real serious agenda. How do we behave and that is a responsibility of government mostly, how do we behave in ways that allows people to forget the past and be a part of what is happening? When someone gets elected in the United States, for example, you become president for all, regardless of who voted Republican or who voted Democrat. You must be the president for everyone. And so I think I'm praying that we'll get a chance to get to that level where it doesn't matter who you are. I would like to say, without fear or favor, that I think President Weah reached out to the opposition when we were in power. There were a lot of people who had said a lot of things who ended up coming to help. It doesn't seem that way now. It seems like the divide is actually real. But I hope they still have some time to kind of fix that, because I think the reconciliation process begins at the top. I think a lot of people have been laid off. And I'll be clear to say, when we took over, President Weah was clear. He's a people person now. And he told all of us to not lay off anybody. Those people are Liberians. And perhaps some of them voted for us. We would not have won overwhelmingly as we did if, some of the regular people didn't say, give him a chance. So who who voted for you and who didn't? When I became vice president, I had the turning over notes with then former vice president Boakai. Mm-hmm. And the entire office of the vice president was left intact. The 30 people I brought on board, I had to go and look for money at the finance ministry for them to add to my budget. Because who are we going to lay off? People from Lufa, people from Bong? It didn't make any sense to me. However, when I left, almost all of the people who were there had been laid off. Some of them were civil servants. They've taken their case to the civil service place and nothing is happening. They're just dragging them back and forth. I believe civil servants should be protected. And this is what George Weah's message was. You meet civil servants in those places, leave them where they are. You got a chance to bring in some people at your level, appointed people you're discussing and see who's working where, but make sure those people remain in place. So we didn't lay off people. So this is what is happening now. There are a lot of people also being laid off. So
when you went to Bong and after the elections and said they should give your time because this was your time, they had their time to rule, What did that mean? Didn't that mean that you were laying out people? You wanted to lay off people?
Appointed people. Again, the government has an opportunity to bring in their own appointed people, which is a very small amount of persons when you look at the whole structure of government. The larger structure of government are civil servants. So the percentage, and we need to check and see what is the percentage of those who are appointed as opposed to the balance of the people that maybe a 10% or 90%. And I'm just saying I haven't checked, But when you look at the percentage of people that remain in government, in fact, some of the United Party ministers remain in our government. 4 or 5 ministers came from the United Party, stayed in place, ministries, agencies, everything stayed the way they were. At one point, the party started to complain, where are our only jobs? So if you have United Party people in place in these major ministries and agencies that are not being moved, how do we get jobs? That was also an issue with us.
What is there any assessment of the Boakai government that we can hear from your perspective?
And Clarence, there are many challenges, and let's look at the challenges. The drug challenge, and I think all of us are disappointed with the way it's being handled. You saw what happened to Boakai Raw. You saw what happened to Peachability. And I was saying to someone the other day, they need to release Peachability. You are buying your own marijuana, smoking it, even though it's wrong. I've been part of the Say No to Drugs campaign a couple of years ago. And I always say at the end of my presentation, if you are wise, don't start. Because that is such a demonic thing that once you start it, most children are unable to bring yourself back. And you can drag yourself into where many of our young people are. I don't think any family is void of this drug thing. Across the board, you will find out the devil doesn't take useless things anyway. He takes the best and the brightest. So all of the best and brightest in our families are affected somehow. My own son had a drug problem for many years. I had to take him all the way to Ghana, get him through the rehab program before he came to himself. And so it's a really serious problem when you're having such a huge consignment of cocaine, laying. Nobody knows where it came from, how it got here, how it was being shipped. And I think the government needs to do a little bit more in terms of letting the public know where we are and getting this solved. And this is at the highest level, so you can imagine what's happening at the lower level. People bringing drugs. Our borders are very porous. People walking across the borders. They said there are some places in our country that the drug people have taken control. They bring their boats, they're drug by boats. Nobody can tell them what to do. So it's a real serious problem. How do we handle it? And I know maybe in our 3rd year or 4th year, looking at the issue of drugs, we started to build rehabilitation centers. I visited one with the president in Kakata, attached to the Kakata hospital, where there were about 30 young men when we had some conversations with them. And there were 2 or 3 other facilities that were opened. Those need to be expanded because the issue of drugs is not just a government problem. It's a family problem. It's a community problem. There are communities where people know where the drugs are coming from, where they are being sold. And everybody's sitting there, not doing anything about it. So everybody has to get involved. But at the level where it is now, this thing has gotten somehow out of control, and we're having real serious issues. So I think the issues of drugs is an Achilles heel for this government. Talk about it, not me.
What did you say recently? Were you misquoted? I saw a video of you making rounds on social media. Did you say the government is doing exceptionally well and nobody should criticize it, or what did you say?
No, I never said that.
What did you say?
I had gotten invited to a program of religious leaders talking about sustaining and improving families. And that's something that's to my heart, and so I thought it was important to attend. And during that program, we talked a lot about what are the gaps in the families. We talked about the fact that the fathers are absent in most homes. Most husbands or most men have 3, 4, 5 homes they have children in, so they rotate. We talk about the fact that there's a gap in the family again because parents are working, both mother and father. We're leaving our children to nurses. We talk about the fact that the media can play a very important role. And it was in that context that I spoke. And I said, when we grew up here, I know on Saturday morning, especially while you were doing your chores at home, my father would put the radio outside on the porch and he would make it very loud because there was teaching going on. It wasn't just radio. They taught hygiene, they taught all kinds of different things. They talk about, the radio would talk about patriotism, what it was like to love your country. So beyond what your parents would teach you on Saturday morning, it was a whole morning of learning. And the radio stayed on till about 2. Hopefully by that time you'll be finished with your work, and then you will have had time to go and do some other things. But the radio was a teaching mechanism. And today we have social media. And my point was, where is that missing in a gap of sustaining families? I said there's nothing on the radio about providing positive information to children. The media is very negative. Every time there's this happening, that happening, the other thing happening, the other happening. So I was talking in that context. And I said I wish the media would be a little bit more positive so that our children, a lot of them are on social media on an international level. They're not paying attention to Liberia really because it's like it's boring. Nothing's happening. You're not teaching anything. Can we use the media now to begin to change the message? I even said, when somebody like Takunje sings a song, everybody pick up that song. Somebody like MC Carey, all of the major players, once they sing a song, even 2-year-old babies will pick up the song. I said it would be a good thing if they would start to talk about patriotism and talk about some of the things that we learned that made us, I believe, better citizens today. And so when the press asked me, what do you think can happen? I said, we can change some of the narrative. And then one press person asked me, do you think anything positive is happening? I said, yes, there are positive things happening. I said, for example, I'm very happy about the fact that the Latter-day Saints, that's the name of the Christian group, is now joining government to build a maternity center. We need a maternity center for women. That's a positive thing. Of course, they took it out of context and said the government is doing well. But it was in that context that I spoke. Okay. I think the government has a lot of challenges, Clarence.
We'll talk about that. At least we're doing